Yeah, hold on. It's almost there.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Yep, that is going good. So we can get the ball rolling.
Okay, good evening, everyone who might be watching this. This is a new version of the City of Muskego Zoning Board of Appeals, May 28th, 2020, 6 o'clock. We will stand wherever we are and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And everyone will see everyone's stomach. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
a nation
God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, roll call. Aaron?
Here.
Chairman Blumenfeld,
Here.
Vice Chairman Schnicker,
Here.
Dr. Kashon,
Here.
Mr. Boschert.
Here.
Mr. Robertson,
Here.
Mr. Wallner,
Here.
Mr. Horrenda,
Here.
and Planner Tresbutowski.
Okay, thank you very much. Statement of public notice.
This meeting was noticed in accordance with the open meeting laws on Friday, May 26th, 25th.
Tell us.
I'm sorry.
22nd.
It was probably the 22nd Friday, I believe, Aaron.
Okay, May 22nd, Friday, May 22nd.
Okay, thank you very much. We will have approval of the minutes at the end of the meeting. Notice of closed session. We sometimes go into closed session, but we haven't gone into closed session since probably 1990. So we probably won't be doing that tonight again. Old business, we have none. New business, appeal number 01-2020, petitioner Philip Jakubowski, property W189 South 6710. Jewel Crest Drive, tax key number 2174.066, requesting under the direction of section 400-18 of the Municipal Code Zoning Board of Appeals, the petitioner seeks the following variances. Chapter 400-23A building location. Location restricted. No building shall be hereafter erected, structurally altered, or relocated on a lot except in conformity with the following locational request regulations as hereinafter specified for the district in which it is located. 1. A setback of 25 feet is required from Jewel Crest Drive right-of-way line. The petitioner seeks a setback of 18.9 feet from the right-of-way for the construction of an attached garage and is therefore requesting a 6.1 foot variance from the required right-of-way setback. 2. An offset of 5.6 feet is required from the north side lot line. The petitioner seeks an offset of 2.5 feet from the north side lot line for the construction of an attached garage and is therefore requesting a 3.1 foot variance from the required north side offset. Mr. Jakubowski and Adam, if you will raise your right hand, we will swear you in for your testimony.
You swear that the testimony you are about to give in appeal number 01-2020 is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jakubowski, would you please present your case to the board and tell us why you've applied for this appeal?
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Yeah,
Okay,
we can see you.
It's only the second time I've used this camera, so.
It's working.
All right, so I'm appealing for this variance as kind of we already have an existing 2.5 car garage there that is in a pretty bad state of disrepair. It needs to be rebuilt at this time. The slab is cracked, it's sinking into the ground. So the existing building is already there. The variance has to be completely new, but what I want to do is just extend that back and attach it to my house. So the setbacks that are in this variance are the current setbacks of an existing building that was constructed in 1976. And then it was rebuilt about 1995 or 1996, somewhere in that range. It was rebuilt the first time. The existing slab was okay at that point. Soon thereafter, a tree got removed from the right of way. The roots that spread out underneath the driveway and garage have now rotted. So the slab is cracked. My neighbor's slab is in the same kind of condition. Her garage is also falling down. So anyway, I'm looking to rebuild my garage, but then also attach it to the house. The unique conditions of my lake lot, I'm on the inside part of a corner, and we looked at different options of moving the garage back to try and meet that 25-foot setback. Once we do that, there isn't even enough room to park a car in the garage because of the distance, how close it is to the house. So what this variance is for is to rebuild what we have there, but then do an extension behind it to attach it to the house and carry the same setbacks that have been in place basically since the 1976 variance when my mom built the garage. So everything I think is all in the application. I hope everybody got all the paperwork that I've sent in. Included in there were letters from my neighbors, everybody that can see it from their house, including the one directly next to me that also has the garage problem going on. She'd be the most affected because she'd see about 8 feet of the extension around her existing garage. So anyway, that's what we're looking to do. For safety reasons, it would be nice to have it attached so we don't have to walk around outside on the sidewalk and that with ice that develops in that. I'm not one that likes to use salt, especially near a lake, but we do have ice problems just because of how near all the different properties are to each other. We get a lot of shading from the neighbor's garage as well. So one would be, yes, it would be convenient to have it attached to the house. 2, it would be safer to have it attached to the house so we don't have the ice buildup on our sidewalk. The structure needs to be rebuilt right now, and the setbacks have been in place, like I said, since 1976. So, but we would have to, create a whole new footing and everything to attach it to the house. So that's the reason for the new variance request here.
And Mr. Jakubowski, would you please reiterate for the board what the hardship is? Is it just the safety issue, or are there any other extenuating circumstances?
The safety issue is one thing. The roadside tree that was removed like I said, it's in the right of way. It wasn't something that we had done. The city came through and removed it. So by that tree being removed, now I'm having the problem with my garage. There also is a drainage issue happening, not on my property, but on a neighboring property. Since the street's been repaved, she gets buildup of water actually all the way back to her garage, which now we see from another safety standpoint, cars will actually cut across the road to go through the water and, splash through the big puddle that's there. So the hardship, I guess I have to rebuild my garage, and it's not really our fault. We're trying to stay within the exact same parameters that were set, way back when, so that the look of the property and the feel of the property doesn't change at all. I am allowed to rebuild my garage exactly as it sits under the existing variance. I'd just like to extend it back so it's connected and we have that inside passageway rather than the outside passageway.
Okay. Question is, are you done, Mr.?
Yeah, I believe I'm done. I'm just reviewing my notes here while I'm looking down.
All right, because once you're done, you're done. So I
Okay.
just want to make sure that you've had the opportunity to say and present as much of your case as possible so that the board knows.
Yeah, and all the lake properties have very unique circumstances. Mine's no different than anybody else's. Anybody else that would move into this house would have the same set of unique circumstances. So we're trying to keep the character of Muskego as it is, because I'm a lifetime resident. My kids one of them intends on staying in this house after we're gone, much like I did with my mom. So the unique shape of our lot, where we're located, where the house is, we looked at different options. We can skinny up the property, or skinny it up and at least meet the one setback if need be. But we have an existing gas meter on that corner of the garage. And after consulting the gas company, they said they'd have to do a road cut in order to move that, to get back to wherever the connection is underneath the road. I don't know why the connection's under there, but that's where it is. So that, and then it changes, the way everything looks from the street too. One of my across the street neighbors has been here longer than my mom was. I believe he bought in 1969. So I asked his input too. I did ask all my neighbors for their input. They all looked at all the plans just to review it all. I asked for their insight, what they would like to see. One of the newer neighbors keeps asking when we're rebuilding the garage, because she sees that it's cracking in half and falling down. So we did look at different circumstances. If we could skinny it up, that would be another option. Decreasing the depth, the setback from the road, I don't think would be an option, just because it doesn't, the car barely fits in the garage now. And if we go from 25 feet down, let's see, that'd be a 7-foot reduction. I only have 5 feet between my house and the garage. An average vehicle isn't going to fit in there. My truck hardly fits in there now. So looking at the setback from the road, altering that wouldn't really work. Altering the width would, but then we involve a road cut and the gas company and all those sorts of problems. And we're also trying not to disturb all the concrete surrounding the garage. And again, nothing's unique just to me. Anybody that would, if anybody would purchase this property in the future, they're going to have the same set of circumstances that I'm dealing with now. I'm trying to make it a better property for myself and for anybody in the future, and make it a safer property to live in.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Now I said my piece, I believe.
Okay. Sorry, didn't
I
mean
will
to
mute
cut you
myself
off.
now.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Members of the board, any questions of Mr. Jakubowski?
I have a few.
Okay,
Okay, first of all, is there going to be an open space issue? Your lot is fairly small. Now you're taking that extra open space between the house and the garage. Adam, I don't know if you can address that, but
There is I believe the open space issue comes down to 358 square feet, which, with that being in consideration, I do have, away from the garage, I have a blacktop driveway, and I would redo that or a portion of it and do paving bricks to get rid of that.
Okay,
So we have
so-
a permeable surface.
so you can get the permeable surface that's needed.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and then some. We can actually do more. I've looked at a couple different options with that, with doing a continuation of concrete, but then bordering it, or doing, paving brick designs in it.
Okay.
Just to reach that. I only became aware of the permeable surface issue about 4 days ago when I got the letter back from Adam. So I spoke with a friend of mine that does concrete work here in the city of Muskego, and he said that would be a great option to do, just to help with that issue.
Okay, and then you said that one of the hardship that you're citing is safety as one. When I'm assuming you have more than one vehicle, so you're parking 2 cars in that garage, correct?
Yes, we're parking 2 cars in
Okay,
that garage.
you said your truck doesn't fit. Would that force you to put that vehicle on the road, parked on the road?
No, we could
Okay.
still park it in the driveway, but then so we've got the space next to the garage where I could park a vehicle. I don't know if the pictures that I have, I included pictures with all the applications. So once I park it next to the garage, that actually shades my driveway, even my sidewalk even more to come into the house. And we
Okay.
do have, my entire life, we've had an issue with ice buildup along that area. We do have a lot of old growth trees around here that shade the area really well. It looks really nice. But on the flip side, I've gone down a few times. My mom went down years ago. We've all had problems with it. So when we
Okay.
park the vehicles in winter, we want to keep them in the garage or keep them near the end of the driveway. Once I bring it to the end of the driveway, since I'm on an inside corner, my neighbor, when he pulls out, he can't see past my vehicle to see if there's cars coming from the north. And the same thing falls into cars coming from the south to my other neighbor.
Okay.
So that inside corner really adds a unique circumstance to the property, because I'm at the peak of that inside corner. And once I park towards the end of my driveway, my neighbors cannot see when they pull out.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that you had this garage rebuilt once before. Is that correct? In 96?
About, yeah, 94 to 96. I don't know the exact date. At that time, the garage was originally built with a hip roof, and it only had a 6-foot door put on it because my mom was unmarried at the time, and that's what she could afford. So then by that time, vehicles have grown in height, so you couldn't fit a vehicle in there again.
Right.
And then the hip roof was also, some of the rafters were rotted on it. So what we did was take the roof off of it. We extended the walls up so that we could put a higher door on. And then we put a regular gable roof on it so it matched the house.
Okay. But the footprint was all the same.
Footprint, the slab has been the same since 1976.
Okay.
That's never changed. All we did was change the height of it, put a bigger door on it, and we changed the facade so it matched the house.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Other members of the board, questions?
I do.
Okay,
Good. First, just a point of clarification and possibly correction on packet page 8, which is page 2 of tonight's agenda. In the discussion paragraph, the second sentence says the property already contains a 2-car attached garage, but we're talking about a detached garage situation currently, and you're looking for approval to attach a garage. So that might just be a small mistake in that paragraph.
Yeah, I can verify. I apologize. Yeah, I apologize. That was a typo. To clarify, it's a house in a detached garage now, and the proposal is to attach it. So
Right. Okay. All right. Very good. And then question for you, a couple questions for you, Mr. Jakubowski.
Yes, sir.
If your appeal is awarded in your favor, would you be removing that permanent shed structure on the north side of your home? It's not shown on the survey, but I did a drive-by and I saw that you've got like a permanent shed type structure on the north side of the house.
Oh, that plastic shed down there?
I didn't know what kind of material. I just saw
Yeah, it's a little plastic shed. Right now, just because fitting 2 vehicles in the garage is tight, our lawnmower and gardening supplies are down there.
Sure.
So I'd be more than happy to remove it. That's not a problem.
Okay.
I wasn't intending to, but if that, is a deciding factor in rebuilding the garage, then by all means, it would be removed.
and we can ask Adam about that once Adam testifies. Okay.
Another question, if I could.
Sure.
In your letter dated March 7th and in your comments tonight, you had mentioned that you had talked to your neighbors and they're in favor of an attached garage that you're proposing. I know that the neighbor on both sides of your home, the north side and the south side, they have detached garages. And maybe you can't answer this question, but I'm just wondering if they're in favor of you getting approval for an attached garage, does that set the stage for they each requesting a variance to attach their garages to their homes? So is this a precedent-setting matter?
No.
May not be a question.
We don't deal with anything except what's before us. So what happens from this point forward is what happens from this point forward, and We are not precedent setting. We are dealing only with Mr. Jakubowski's appeal of, for the variance tonight. Okay, and just so you know, Mr. Jakubowski, Neil is new to our board. We don't meet that often, but these questions are great because
Yeah. No, I'm all in favor, and I can answer partially to that too, because the discussion was.
No, please
I don't need to. Okay.
No, you don't need to.
Okay.
We're just dealing with your appeal. Okay.
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 Thank
Neil,
you.
any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from members of the board?
So I have a question.
Okay, Joe.
Is it possible to move the garage back away from the road and away from that property line? And then why or why not?
I can move it away from the property line and away from the road. It will give me room for one vehicle because of the proximity to the house. Because of the attachment of it, if you have the plan at all near you, once it's attached to the house, my daughter's mode of egress to her bedroom will be covered up. So we have to add a window to the front of the house so that she has her secondary path of egress. But then for the access internally into the house, we would be removing 3 closets that all line up right now. And both the closets would protrude then into the garage space. And by taking approximately 50 square feet out of that garage by these closets going into there, once we bring it back 7 feet towards the house and we skinny it up by 4, I believe I'll fit 1 vehicle in there. There would be no room for a vehicle between the closet and the overhead door where we enter in right now. It's just, it's going to be too short of an area. I guess I could fit like, a 2-seat car in there, but we have 2, 4-door vehicles right now. So it would be tight. I mean, that option is available. But we'd be down to a 1-car garage. The whole look of everything, the whole feeling of the neighborhood, I think is going to change because it's been like this for so long. And then I'm also dealing with moving that gas meter, slicing the road open, changing. At that point, we'd probably have to tear up the sidewalk in the driveway in front of the garage, which is poured concrete. So those are all personal financial issues, but getting down to a 1-car garage when we have 2 of them and the issues we have with parking next to it with the ice buildup and then parking in front of the garage or at the end of our other part of our driveway, leads to that. How much my neighbors can see when they pull out of their yards. So I'm trying to do it the most pleasant way possible so that it maintains the feeling of the neighborhood and everything, and doesn't make anybody really look at it differently. I guess I'm at a loss for words on exactly what I'm trying to say.
Sure. No, thank you.
Any other questions, Joe? Aaron, any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Jakubowski, I have a couple questions. You said that you've lived in the house since 1976, approximately?
1978, I was born here.
Okay.
So my mom bought it in 1972 before she got married, and then she built the garage in 1976.
Okay. You cited safety reasons as one of the hardships for this request in this appeal, and you lived there a long time. How many times approximately in your recollection have people had issues with ice and falling? How many times have people fallen?
On my property?
Yes.
A lot.
Have any of them been serious falls of people?
I had a broken tailbone, which resulted in an infection in my lower back, which it was about 15 years before it was completely cured. My mom had a broken arm just from the one particular corner of the garage where ice always builds up. My sister growing up here had a few falls. There have been many near accidents with parking at the end of the driveway of car. We have a lot of speeding problems on Jewel Crest Drive. And when a car pulls out, we nose out really slow. And there's been my neighbor across the street can attest to it. There's always been quite a few issues on this inside corner. So yeah, there's been more falls than I could probably count. I had one personally. The tailbone one was pretty bad, and I've had 2 surgeries to correct it over 20 years.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to touch on the gas meter issue. Is the gas meter attached to the garage?
Yes, it was originally attached to the house, and the gas company, the way the line was run kind of underneath my sidewalk between the house and garage, they didn't like how it ran. So they decided to remove it from the house and mount it to my garage. At that point, they mounted it to the garage and they stapled a piece of copper around the exterior of the garage to get behind it and let back underground. That line is probably split 4 or 5 times. Once the meter's taken off the house so that we can redo this, the line's going to be brought internal into it so that there's no more, it gets hit with snow from my neighbor's yard. I've had it changed over to cast iron, but we have had gas leaks in the past because of that meter location, and there's really not a whole lot they can do about it.
So regardless of whether or not the appeal is granted or you just rebuild your garage the way it is, that gas meter will be relocated once you...
No, it'll stay right in that existing location, but the gas line that they have run externally on the property right around the garage will be run internally, because we'll be removing the firewalls and we'll have a place to run the gas line inside. It's about 3 feet off the ground right now, and it's strapped to the side of the building.
Okay. In either case, it'll be worked on. If you...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that safety issue will be taken care of. I'm just trying to avoid cutting the road open to move it to, if we skinny it up, they said they can't move the line. They have to do something from the road. They did it. They cut the road open once when they moved it to the garage from the house. And we're trying to avoid having another cut.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board?
Yeah, I have one. It's Russ. I have one question related to that.
Okay.
So if you chose not to repair the garage, the insufficient gas meter and line would not be corrected at all. If you did nothing, it would continue the way it is.
Correct, because we have firewalls in there that I don't want to have to rebuild to change this. It has been like this for quite a while, but we have had multiple problems with it over the course of, probably the past 15 years. Probably about 15 years ago is when they moved it. And 5 years ago is when I had the gas line changed. It got rid of that little copper pipe they had out there and changed it to an actual cast iron pipe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Jakubowski, I just want to make it clear, regardless of whether or not your appeal is approved or you rebuild your garage the way it is, you are going to rebuild your garage. Is that correct?
Yes, it has to be done. The garage is sunk about 6 inches down into the ground on one side. The slab is cracked from front to back, and it actually bent my door now. So I was trying to save the door too, to save some money in that. We've had a lot of medical expenses with one of my kids. So we're trying to save as much as we could. We've been trying to do this for about the past 4 years. And now we finally reached the point where we have to do something with it because it's in such a state of disrepair.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay, then we will close the public portion of the meeting. I'm sorry, Adam? Sorry.
Yep.
I'd like to hear from Adam. Would you please present the city's portion?
Yeah, go ahead. And just so you know, I feel like so I don't have audio issues. I did mute everyone temporarily, and I'll unmute it when we need to talk. So yeah, and one thing I want to start with is I want to let everyone know, since this meeting was done in a very different format and we aren't in a building where the public's in there voicing concerns, I definitely want to reiterate that the applicant did submit a handful of letters that were in the packet that you all received digitally. of neighbors from various locations that do support this project. And, specifically one of those being the neighbor that is immediately to the north. So I just wanted to confirm that, as you probably already saw. But, in this different type of meeting, that's probably one of the best examples of public input we can have. Also, the city did receive one phone call from Jackie Cloud at S66 W18557 Jewel Crest Drive. So their comment was they were for the variance. They think the garage is an eyesore now, and they are very glad that it's getting fixed up. So that was one comment we received, as well as, and I just got to put my email here. We received an email from Mike Lebenzeter. I don't have his exact address, but he lives on Jewel Crest Drive, I believe, across the street. And he more so just had questions. So we kind of told him we would kind of highlight some of his questions. He was just asking some things about, how are setbacks determined, and are they a safety-based thing, or are they aesthetics? And so Aaron put together a good email back to that person. So rather than read the whole email, because it's very lengthy, and a lot of them are just more for their information, the overall goal of the email, though, did make it clear that they are in favor of this, especially since they're not going any closer than the existing garages today. And like I said, that person was from Mike Lebenzeter. So I just wanted those two things kind of in as part of the record, since they were, things that people would have said at a meeting that aren't able to say tonight. But overall, I think a lot of this has been covered pretty good. I don't think there's a lot I need to add. I'll start with some of the questions that came up. One of them was relating to the open space. So yeah, open space, we don't run those numbers till we do a detailed review and until we have a good survey to do so. And based upon the survey that was turned in, and we're using the numbers that were calculated by the land surveyor, as the property sits today, without anything happening, the property is 358 square feet over open space today. We're not here to discuss how did that happen. I don't know. It's not our worry. If they do go forward with any option, they do have to rectify any overages, even if it is more than they're over today. With the proposal, though, per the surveyor's calculations, they're over by 799 square feet, if this, as the survey shows it. Now, that shed that was mentioned isn't accounted for, and that shed is a separate thing I'll talk about in a second. But so they're probably even more than 799 over if that shed remains. So if this variance is not granted and the garage is rebuilt as it sits today, they'll still have to correct 358 square feet of open space overage no matter what. If the variance is granted, that number that has to be adjusted or removed goes up to 799 square feet plus the shed if the shed were to remain. On the shed note, I didn't see a record, and I didn't search the file in detail, but at a glance didn't see a permit for a shed. If it had one, it doesn't necessarily have to go unless it needs to go for open space reasons. If it didn't have a permit and for open space reasons, it needs a permit, even if it is plastic, even if it's temporary in nature. So that might be something we have to deal with through the permitting process down the road, but that isn't something that's accounted for in our numbers, as we didn't know it was there. As far as, let's see here, there were questions about setting a precedent, as Dr. Blumenfield clarified, and I'll just hit on two, is each case should be looked at on its own merits. And that's one thing. I actually did talk to the owner that owns the home to the north of this home, and they had some questions. And one of the things I made clear to them without them even asking, just so they knew, is that, by them saying they're in favor of this, that doesn't guarantee they're going to get the same thing someday if they want it. And they didn't even allude to they wanted it, but they kind of said maybe someday. But I did make it clear that each case is its own, and whether this variance is granted or not, that doesn't have a bearing on theirs, as they might have their own uniquenesses one way or the other. And then just kind of one other comment that came up about the icing in between the home. Yeah, I don't discredit that at all. It sounds like it's been a severe problem. And just as I know from talking to the neighbor to the north too, drainage between the two garages is kind of a problem right now, as the applicant mentioned too. So, whether this garage gets rebuilt as is or rebuilt with the addition attaching it, either way, we know that there will be plenty of options to correct drainage. Between the two neighbors is one area that the neighbor mentioned needs to be looked at, as well as even if the variance weren't granted, and there still is some concrete torn up, I'm sure there's some options to put some drains and stuff in that would help some of that icing problem between the homes. So this is a good chance to fix a lot of things, since the whole foundation is going to come up no matter Other than that, though, you know, as the board knows, and for the newer members, you know, when staff prepares our staff supplement, which you've all seen, I'm sure, you know, it's meant to just provide fact, and using case law and you know, different statute requirements. We try to, you know, look at different things. And as you know, I think the applicant and the owner covered it pretty well, and the board had good questions. You want to reiterate, there was that older variance out there. That was something we weren't aware about at first, and that's all part of our due diligence of doing this preparation was, you know, we were aware of that. So just to clarify, in case the board doesn't get it, is no matter what happens here, as a fallback, for lack of a better term, there always is the ability to build that garage exactly as it sits from a location and size standpoint. They can change height if they needed to, but they would not be able to change length, width, or location. And that would only be if the variance isn't granted. Now, if the variance is granted, then obviously the variance is granted. But that old garage being there, I want to clarify too, the new proposed attached garage is no closer to the road than that old approved garage, and is no closer to the side. That was one thing that you know, some people ask questions about ahead of time too, and I wanted to make very clear. Yeah, there's nothing's getting any closer to any direction. It would just be a matter of, does it go back further or does it not? As far as some of the items that were listed, you know, and that has been mentioned, you know, some of the case law that's out there, I'm going to hit on just a couple big ones, you know, things the board should keep in mind that are in that supplement. One of them is that, you know, the hardship cannot be self-imposed, and they can't be circumstances of the applicant. So that's something the board needs to think about. You know, if somebody comes into us and just says, I just want more space, well, that's unique to somebody. Or if they say, I happen to have a lot more storage or more vehicles or teenage drivers, those shouldn't be grounds for granting of a variance. And I'm not saying those are specifically used here, or not some of those. The biggest thing is, you know, the hardship has to be the same no matter who lives here, whether they have 1 car, 10 cars, or a lot of storage or no storage. So the board should kind of keep that in mind when looking at this. Another thing is that the parcel needs to be considered as a whole. So the board kind of needs to look at everything that's out there, and the idea of, you know, can it be built in the same footprint? Can it not? You know, and are there other options out there? And that, you know, other options is key. And, you know, one of the options that by the board granting the approval in 1976, I mean, they kind of, in a way, even though different times, no doubt, they kind of drew a little bit of a line in the sand saying, hey, this is what we're approving. In fact, in looking at the record, I believe the garage that was proposed was even a little closer to the road and or the side. And where it is today was actually compromised. The board denied the original request, but allowed lesser of a variance that got them where they are today. So one of the things that's important there is, you know, in the case law, it talks about, you know, the minimal variance needed to grant a waiver should all that be granted. So given that variance was granted before, someone could make the case to say, okay, they already got what's minimal. If the board wanted to give them more back then, they could have, and they shouldn't be allowed more today. Now, on that same argument, you could maybe argue they're not asking for more today because they're not getting any closer. So that one's kind of, you know, it definitely applies here, but how you apply it is up to the board members, because it can be interpreted a little bit different ways, being that they aren't asking to get closer. And as far as, you know, the owner hasn't mentioned this, but one thing that we do always mention is financial hardship can't be grounds for granting of a variance. Even though I know it's not talked about here, it's something we like to cover just so the board's aware. And any other nearby violations and or lack of objection from neighbors, both of those aren't grounds alone for granting a variance. Even though if neighbors aren't against it, it doesn't hurt the scenario. We always advise people it doesn't guarantee it's going to be granted either, because, you know, opinion of a neighbor isn't a hardship per se. As far as there's what's called the 3-step test, which is talked about in a lot of the zoning literature out there. It talks about a necessary hardship, unique property limitations, and no harm to public interest. So kind of we do that. We kind of look at each of those. You know, a necessary hardship is when, you know, there would be really no practical use of the property without the variance. Because there was the old variance, this one's a little bit different once again. And there are, like I said, there is the option out there to rebuild the old garage as it was. As far as unique property limitations, you know, I know the owners mentioned some things with the curve and the lot width. I mean, no one's going to argue that a narrow lot isn't hard to deal with, but given that there was a garage there from that 1976 variance, you know, that's something they have to consider. And then as far as public interest, yeah, I don't think there's any harm to the public. You know, obviously the current drainage issues could cause harm to people on the property. There's no discredit to that at all. But the biggest thing would be whether the variance is granted or not, that shouldn't affect anything with the public. You know, it's plenty far off the road still, even though it doesn't meet the setback, it's still plenty far. It's not like it's a few feet away. staff definitely understands about the idea of the decaying roots and stuff like that. So I think it's good to hear from the owner that no matter what happens, they are going to rebuild something. And I think that's good because it's going to help drainage issues. We don't want to discredit that because that can be a real serious thing with the decay of those roots and stuff. And we do want to admit, I do appreciate the idea of not moving the gas meter in any scenario because that road is newer pavement. And, obviously we don't like to cut into our roads if we don't have to, especially when they're newer. So that's something that it's good to hear that it can stay no matter what. So, I mean, when the staff did their review, then, the staff's recommendation is denial. And as I explained to the owner earlier this week, it's not a personal thing. It's just looking at the facts. And the only real big basis behind that is since there was a variance already granted that does allow a 2-car garage, not attached, but still, that was our recommendation. But that old garage can be put exactly where it was before at the same size as before. Now, there's 2 notes we want to make known here. And one of them I touched on a little bit. And that first one is the open space, like we mentioned. So whether the variance is granted or not, open space does have to come into compliance. And that kind of ties to the second note, which is permits are needed, obviously, to do whatever the outcome is here, whether it's granted or not. I'm sure the owner understands that, but I want the whole board to know that too, that there will be a permit process after this, regardless of the outcome. And as part of that, we will have to make sure open space is adjusted. Now, because the number, if the variance is approved, is pretty high, 799 square feet, and that's assuming the shed goes away. There is a back patio, there is a little concrete by the lake, and there are the concrete and asphalt driveways. The owner will have the ability to propose what they want to do to correct that. If for some reason the owner can't make that work, for whatever reason, as the board knows, they could be back here at a different time for a different topic relating to that open space. Hopefully we can work it out without that. But we just want to make that clear. And we didn't know this number sooner because we didn't, when we do, like I said, do this deep down dive in as prep for the meeting, which Aaron so gratefully prepared. That's really when we discovered those numbers. So that's why we want to bring it up, even though it's not part of the case. Obviously it came up from I think it was Henry brought that up or whomever. And, so since it was a big thing, I wanted to bring that up. So that's really all I have to say. So I'll go ahead and unmute everybody here. All right.
Barb, it sounds like you're muted.
Good. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Adam. Any board members have questions of Adam?
Yeah, this is Russ. I have a couple.
Okay.
Adam, if we reduce this down to the basic facts of what we're doing here, and I'll talk about the open space in a minute, but the basic point of contention is not the set-asides, because we talk about how, and I'm going to ask a question here, but we talk about how it's a variance, but the variance is already granted and the garage is already there. And if they do nothing, the garage is already there. And we can talk about hypothetical garages being built, but there's no garage being built today. It's really the thing that's being changed on the surface of that lot is there's going to be a pad put in which they're going to connect the existing space to the house. Does that existing space violate any of the set-aside rules that exist today?
I guess the way I'd answer that is, and this is in some of the handout literature we have that talks about when a variance is granted for something specific, so a certain size garage, there's actually some things I'm going to talk about. That variance doesn't carry over to being allowed to expand it. So someone could argue, yeah, they're getting no closer, right? Because they definitely aren't getting any closer. They're violating what the normal requirement would be because it's already too close. But so it's kind of a hard question. But I mean, in theory, the old variance applied only to that one size. As soon as the variables change, like wanting a bigger building, the board requires you to look at it completely fresh. And that's what the legal literature says, is you're looking at a fresh start. But other than open space, from just the practical standpoint, just looking at it practically, no, they are not getting any closer on the side. They're not getting any closer on the front. The only thing would be the open space.
And then the other question is if they did nothing today, and I want to be totally fair here. If he did nothing, left the garage, stunk in 6 feet down here, 6 feet up there, whatever. would our community enforce open space requirements on a garage that's existed now for 50 years? And that no one ever noticed there was an open space problem?
Open space is only evaluated at time of permitting. So the only way we would make the applicant adjust open space would be if he applies for a permit, we're required to make sure compliance is achieved then. So even if he came in for a permit to do a patio extension, forgetting about the garage, open space at that time would have to be complied with site-wide. Now, we wouldn't just drive around looking for it. It would have to be initiated either by that permit process, or the only other exception, but these are very, very rare, to be complaint. We've had a few people kind of unfortunately say, hey, I got denied for a driveway that was so big, instead of 3-car, I had to go to 2-car wide. How come my neighbor has a 4-car wide? And we find out they weren't supposed to. And that's the only other scenario. That is extremely rare, but it's happened. Most of the time it's queued up during that permit review for any kind of permitting that affects open space. So if the permit would be for a deck, which doesn't affect open space, we don't run the number. But if the permit's for concrete, we have to run it. If it's for a garage or shed, we have to run it.
Okay.
Any other, are you done, Russ?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions of Adam from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. So just to clarify, the whole open space issue is not in scope for this discussion, correct?
Correct. I mean, there are ways the owner can deal with that, with removing hardscape and replacing pavers or something like you mentioned. It's just a question of how much. And if we did want to go there, if he did want a variance for that, that would have to be a separate topic, separate day. We just brought it up on our end because it's important to know, we don't want to leave anyone, whether it's a board member or the applicant, not knowing it. But we didn't discover it till we did our detailed review as part of this preparation.
Right. But for the merits of this case, pretty much just put it out of mind.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yep, I would agree with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Dealing with the appeal, with the variance appeal. So the open space is another issue at another time.
Okay. My other question is, there was some safety issues that were brought, forward. Do those fall under any of the 3 test categories?
Let's see here. The one talks about the whole public interest, and it's not defined. Could public be public roadway, meaning any area where anybody can be? Could public mean just meaning the general public, meaning anybody, whether they're in the roadway or not? We obviously wouldn't intentionally want to do something that would harm the public, which is that third thing I mentioned. But I don't think by them either rebuilding the garage as it exists today, they can fix drainage issues and install drains and direct downspouts and whatnot. So I think they're not harming. And obviously if the variance is granted, it doesn't harm it because they're actually taking away a potential problem. So no, I don't think that specifically violates any of those 3 tests, because one of the tests really only would relate to that. The other 2 are more so, is the hardship unnecessary and is there something really unique on the property? I don't think there's a negative impact, in my opinion.
Okay. Is it fair to say that though, if something is indeed attached, there is significantly reduced safety risk than if something is detached?
I think in practical real world purposes, the answer to that is yes. I mean, who would argue to say if I can be completely enclosed away from the elements, that's not a safer situation? From a code analyzation standpoint, the zoning code doesn't address that. So it's kind of twofold, but I think from a practical standpoint, really looking at it, yeah, of course it would be safer if I don't have to transition into potential hazardous weather elements.
Safety is something that we've looked at in the past for many cases. And so we can discuss that when we go into discussion after we close the public portion of the meeting. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Adam? Henry?
Adam, Kurt Horrenda. Adam, what's the speed limit on that street? 25?
I don't know for sure, but I would think that's a pretty safe assumption.
Has Public Works or Public Safety looked at the issue with the driveway as far as traffic and people having accidents, or as the petitioner had mentioned that as people back out, has there been a significant issue enough to where it had to been addressed by Public Safety or DPW now? I think they're combined now, I think.
Yeah, it's one committee. Not that I've heard of. If it's something an owner, don't get me wrong, I don't deal with that board specifically, so it could have been a past topic that I'm not aware of, so I don't want to hide that. you know, if maybe the owner can speak if he knows if it ever went to a public level, but if the owners of any of the homes in that area had significant concern, you know, and now this is, you know, the first time I really know of it, just because, you know, they experience it every day. I don't. So I can understand that on their side. The direction now would be contacting their alderperson, and, you know, if they wanted to bring it to Public Works and Safety Committee, that, you know, then that's the group board that does deal with speed limits. That would be the appropriate venue to ask for it. But I'm personally not aware of any past discussions there that I've heard of.
And again, the reason why I'm bringing it up, because, you know, it's been brought into the safety issue, but there might be a different venue to handle them safety issues compiled by this, adding on this additional garage.
I mean, and there are, I mean, and not that we're comparing others, but just looking at the city as a whole, Lake Lot specifically, you know, just there are many homes that are compliant with the 25, which is a lake setback, you know, street setback on a lake lot. And there are many that are more, but there's also many that are less. And not comparing, you know, there's a lot, it's not uncommon for a lot of these lake lots to pretty much just have a car's depth between the road and the garage, which I think we'll all agree is less than ideal. But like in this scenario, you can only do so much before that house starts getting in the way, that it gets to be tough. I think that if the owner had, you know, had real concerns about speed or something there, like I said, it should go to that committee, but I don't know how that would really impact the garage design, as, you know, that affects, you know, a whole group of people, not just a single homeowner.
No, and I do agree with you that I don't know how much it would affect the actual build of the garage, but it's being used as a as an item in this discussion that applying for the hardship, or these are his concerns, you know, along with the ice and sidewalks. You know, everyone has ice. I understand there's more buildup in certain areas. Also with the neighbor supporting, with the creating a precedent, obviously. Also draining issues. Is that on Turnout property, or would that be something by the road?
My understanding, and the owner can chime in on this, I believe the road kind of drains between the subject property and the property to the north of it, kind of between the two garages. Is that correct, Phil, or no? Which way does it go?
So years ago, the drainage issue has been an issue my entire life. And it took complaints from most of the street at one time, where they actually put a physical drain in the center of my property. So it's in front of the garage, kind of off to the south side. There's a drain there. Then they repaved the road once. When they repaved, they actually left the drain at the same height. There was about a 18-inch hole where the drain was. Cars would come through there. They'd cut the corner into my driveway and actually start sliding and squealing tires because their cars were going out of control. So then they came through and they raised that drain up at that point, so that it drained everything once again. This last time they repaved the road, they repaved it up again. Now my neighbor's property is the concern. Theirs isn't draining into mine anymore because of the street pavement. She has appealed to DPW to come and remedy it, I believe more than once, and we've gotten nowhere with that at this time. So my plan was to lower my driveway down so that no matter what happens with the street, we would still have, you know, that corner. There's a mound kind of there that I want to get rid of, where the old tree stump was, and there was a bush that was removed at one time too because of this corner. We tried to clean it up so that people could see going around this corner. So at that time, you know, once we have the machinery here to take the garage down, I can get all that garbage out of there, and hers will no longer pool. We don't even have to get a physical drain back in. But now talking about, you know, the open space issue, I would definitely.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but usually once the applicant's testimony is done, we don't allow them to come back in and continue testifying. So I know Adam asked you a question, and I appreciate you providing that information, but we're moving on to questions for Adam. Anybody else on the board have any other questions for Adam concerning his presentation or the city's position?
One more is Kurt Horrenda. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the property owner that maintains the right of ways?
Yeah, as far as like grass cutting and stuff, yeah, they do. If they don't, the city does cut a couple times a year. As far as like paving, yeah, they are their responsibility. Everything between really from the garage to the road edge is the responsibility as far as like paving, patching, whatever of the homeowner. And then once you start dealing with the actual public road itself, that's when the city DPW takes over.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Adam? Okay, thank you very much. This concludes the public portion of our meeting. We will now deliberate on the applicant's request for a variance. I need a motion from someone from the board.
It's Russ. I'd make a motion to approve the variance in the public with the hardship of the public interest of safety.
I'll second that.
Can we just back up a minute or just
Certainly.
as a friendly amendment, add the number of the appeal, just so we have a public record of the appeal?
Sure. I'll default to the number of the, I have to look it up.
And whatever you have to do to make this right.
Okay, wait. I almost have it. Appeal
just-
number 01-2020.
There you go. Okay. And Henry?
And I second that motion.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. And for the record, it's the appeal of Mr. Phil Jakubowski at the address that he has presented of his house. Okay, discussion. Who would like to start?
Since I made the motion, I'll be clear. I think we to be clear, if we reduce this down to the simple question of would we approve a rebuild of this garage on the current slab, and we had to revisit the issue of the variance given 50 years ago, in my opinion, I would approve it immediately. And so for me, that isn't really the question. The question is do we attach it to the house? And you know, the property owner needs to account for the open space issues, which is in the public interest of drainage and permeable surface in the first place, something that probably shouldn't have gotten out of our hands 50 years ago. But to me, if we were just simply confronted with rebuilding a garage on an existing slab or an existing spot, I couldn't see how we would say no.
Okay, thank you, Russ. Henry?
Yes, in 1976, when this was this appeal was granted, they didn't ask to attach it to the garage, and I'm assuming that's, or to the house, and I'm assuming that's probably a financial decision back at that time. And knowing, well, I guess I wasn't on the board back then, but back then, if it were requested to attach it to the house, I'm fairly certain that at that point, it probably would have, and we wouldn't have this discussion right now at all. So, yeah, the setback is the same, the offset is the same. It's just a matter of that few feet between the house and the back of the garage. So, is safety enough to make that happen? We've granted safety issues in the past. If you look at what the board did back in 1976, it was basically a lot shape and size issue, or as we like to call it, topography. So yeah, so it's a decision of a few feet between the back of the garage and the house. Can we justify that?
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the board want to make any statements?
Aaron Robertson here.
Aaron, go ahead.
Yes. Based on what has been said so far, I'm in agreement. I could maybe see tying a possible safety issue to the public interest test. Public interest, as Adam indicated, doesn't seem to be very well defined. So there may be some room for interpretation here based on my understanding. Other than making a possible safety argument under the public interest test, I really don't see any other valid hardship. I also understand that the expansion will only be at the back and doesn't get closer to the road or increase the front. And so based on what's been said so far, I'm in agreement based on what I think I'm hearing. I would feel comfortable, I think, with approval on a safety issue. And going back to that 1976 decision, yeah, we have to do some speculation on what may have happened back then. If an attached garage had been proposed back then, I would feel confident today that most likely it would have been approved back then. It's, in my mind, a pretty non-controversial issue. So I'm comfortable with approval on a safety issue.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Joe, do you have any comment? You don't
No.
have to. I'm just asking if you want to make a comment.
No comments.
Okay. Neil and Kurt, because you're the alternate members, you're not part of the discussion. But let me just say that in 1976, the variance and the community were far different than they are now. And approving a variance back then to put a garage up of that size is a little different than it is now. And we all know that lake lots are extremely unique and that there are different parameters for some of those lots that we don't have on some of the regular subdivision lots that we have now. In addition, I think the safety issue is and has been, as we've discussed in the past with other appeals, an extremely important one, because no one should be putting their life in danger at any time if they can avoid it, because we have bad winters here sometimes. We have really nice winters here sometimes. But having someone slip and fall, break an arm, break a back, that's not what we're hoping will happen for residents of our city. And so I think that can be concluded as a hardship. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Jakubowski is willing to, say that he'll rebuild the garage regardless. But how much safer would it be if he rebuilt it so that he doesn't have to have his family take their lives in their hands during winter to get into the house? Yes, we could modify the parameters of the request, but I don't think that would be in the best interest of either the applicant, the board, or the city to do that. And so I do believe that this hardship of safety is something that we need to address. I would ask that if this is approved, that perhaps we have a friendly amendment going backwards to indicate that we want both the open space compliance read into the motion and the permits, which he'll have to get anyway. But we found in the past that if we aren't as specific as possible in our motions, that we sometimes have issues with compliance. Not saying that this would happen in this case, but we are a little gun shy, and being more specific, I think, is better for everybody. And I think Henry will attest to that. And so if the maker of the motion would, again, approve or agree to a modification of the motion, and the seconder would agree that we put in the open space compliance and the permit permit requirements.
But Barb, just
Accepted, and my dog, by the way, accepts too.
You die.
So Barb, just to clarify though, the open space issue is not in scope for this discussion, right? That is part of the permitting process, which is another thing altogether, right?
It is, but for us to say, all we're doing is saying that if this is approved, that if they're going to build the garage to the specifications that have been requested, it then presents an issue of non-compliance with open space. And
And-
so because of what we're saying we're going to do, we could do, then we're saying that that then raises another issue, which would need to be addressed in order for him to build the garage.
And Barb, we want to be clear to Mr. Jakubowski that we don't expect to see him here 6 months from now asking for a variance on open space. I mean, we want to be clear that that isn't coming down the road, and that we've already addressed that issue.
Well,
And that's one of the reasons I put the amendment in there, so that we're clear about our expectations.
and that doesn't mean that we can't stop him from doing that.
No, we certainly could.
Okay, but it just makes it a little clearer as to
Yeah.
what we're finding acceptable as part of the appeal process.
Barbara?
Yes.
So just for me to be clear on things, you see the hardship of safety because of ice on a private property.
I think for the
I'm just trying to get my,
sure. I think the individual who's asking for this variance is saying that yes, they've lived there a long time, and yes, they've had incidents where safety has been an issue and it's caused bodily harm to people who have lived there. And we have found that in the past that safety of the homeowners is grounds for citing a hardship. Yes.
thank you.
I want to quickly chime in. I think Henry needs to second that amendment, just to make sure we don't miss.
I will re-second, or am I re-seconding? I'll re-second it.
Thank you.
Well, actually, it's withdrawn and then it's resubmitted in all Russ's fine oratory and with everything that Adam is going to put in that says that it's approved with these conditions as it's approved as requested with these conditions. And then you, Henry, are saying, yeah, that's good.
That's right.
And then if everybody's in agreement on that, we will now have a vote.
Wait, can you repeat the amended motion?
Sure. I think so. You want to do it? Or you want me to do it?
I can. Yeah. So I have it as, it's a motion to approve appeal 01-2020, and we'll include the name and address in there.
Mhm.
To approve it based upon public safety and to make sure that the open space is compliant as part of the permit
Not
review.
public safety, but about safety issues.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Not public safety, but safety issues.
Okay.
Okay.
So the motion was to approve appeal 01-2020 for safety related issues.
Yep.
And that open space must be in compliance, making you aware of that, and that permits are required.
Right.
Thank you.
Henry, did you second that?
I did second it.
Okay. Any other questions before we have a vote? Okay, then Aaron, can you give us a vote?
Yep. Vice Chairman Schnecker,
Yes, I to approve.
Dr. Kayshawn,
You're on mute.
Yes.
Mr. Boschert,
Yes.
Mr. Robertson,
I vote yes.
and Chairman Blumenfeld.
Yes.
So motion 01-2020 is approved 5-0.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Jakubowski, good luck with your project. And
Thank you very much.
okay.
All right.
Safe days to you ahead. Okay, thank you very much. We will now go into approval of the minutes of October 29th, 2019. I have a motion?
To approve?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
move to approve the minutes from October 29th.
Good. We have a second?
I guess I'll
Robertson here, I'll
second it.
second.
Okay.
Oh,
all in
Go
favor,
ahead,
say-
Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Thanks.
We finally walked all over each other. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Good, the motion passes. We have no miscellaneous business. Motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
And we are adjourned at 7:10 PM. Thank you all very much for participating in this new, unique way of doing our meetings. We know we can do it now, and hopefully we won't have to do it again because we'll be back at City Hall eventually. And Aaron and Adam, thank you very much again for all of your hard work and your effort for setting this up and keeping us all informed and getting us the information. So much appreciated. Thank you all very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
everybody stay
Thanks.
healthy and safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a safe
Thank
You
night.
too. Thank you, everyone.